Hello people of the earth and welcome to QuickSaveTV. Name's Mike and today I'm going to talk to you about building your character in Diablo 3. This is my first time uploading a video to Machinima. I apologize, I'm really nervous. I never had to actually offer my video to other audience except for my channel, and I hope you enjoy it. So what is character building in a nutshell? Now, in any action RPG there is this major part of the game called deciding where to spend your skill points and equipping your character. Now that's essentially the character building. In any game, in all games, it works slightly different, even if there's a lot of similarities when we talk about games such as Torchlight, for instance, compared to Loki. Although there's a lot of similarities in the building a character, they're very different in a way of the amount of skill points used and the way they evolve, the types of them, and that you can use spells in types of equipment, and that you also have a pet in Torchlight. Now, in Diablo 3, there are several things you have to pay attention to. Let's go ahead and just talk to them one after another and see how we can actually improve these things. Now, I want to suggest you to go with a solid character build over a gimmicky build. Now, what's the difference? Gimmicky build is a kind of build that relies on something very specific or something very gimmicky to put something that's not always in stone, that's not set in stone, and it's not always work 100% of the time. Like, for instance, when you rely on one specific skill that is very expensive and you really rely on it, right? So you go from fight to fight using only this skill, you obliterate everything, but you're kinda out of mana or any other source of energy you have, and it's kinda not so useful. Now, solid build is a kind of build that not only performs well, but also does not need to be, let's say, inactive for prolonged periods of time in order to be effective again. So you're 100% of the time effective at your 100% capacity. Like, for instance, even though you use your most strongest spell, you still have a lot of them to replace, a lot other spells to replace your current one. So you have no problem. So for instance, you have AoE solution, you have single target solution, you have a solution for specifically difficult fights, you have heal, you have retreat and mobility perks, and etc, etc. So it's very strong idea and wise idea to actually consider building a solid character rather than a gimmicky. Although gimmicky characters can perform rather well in PvP, it's not the case in PvE, not so much. Now, I've talked a little bit about single target and AoE. What's the difference? Single target is when you actually focus fire on one target and you completely ignore or cannot deal damage to other targets around it. Essentially, it is most effective against sturdy targets and targets that are bosses, elite mobs, and especially, of course, bosses is probably the best example. Single target attacks usually are much more powerful than AoE attacks, but do not damage crowds, okay? And the AoE attacks, the area of effect, so-called, they are not so damaging. However, they are so devastating en masse that they are actually out-damaging single target attack. Now, I would argue that in order to have an effective character build, at least for PvE, you have to have both solutions. You have to have a single target appropriate skills and AoE appropriate skills. When you only focus on AoE or only focus on single target, you are not as effective, because from one side you would say, oh, single target focus, that means I can easily kill bosses. Yes, you are correct, you're much better in boss fights, but you absolutely suck when you have to fight against crowds. Or only AoE solution, you devastate crowds, you kill hundreds of mobs in a second, but when it comes to boss, you kinda suck, because you cannot deal so much damage, and the battle lasts much longer than it should have, and it just becomes much more difficult for you to actually survive it because of the boss damage. Okay, next. Understanding what do you actually aim for, what stat, what attribute, what characteristic. Like, for instance, it can be damage, it can be, if we talk about attributes, it can be strength, stamina, agility, or intellect. You have to aim for one specific attribute. And although vitality in Diablo 3 is universal for all the classes and gives essentially you hit points, that's all it does. More hit points, never bad. But the thing is that each class can focus for a specific attribute, right? When we have Barbarian, we say strength. When we have Demon Hunter or Monk, we say agility. Or dexterity, excuse me. And when we talk about Mage and the Witch Doctor, we talk about intelligence. Although each of the characteristics of attributes, they actually give bonus to all the classes, they're particularly important for some specific classes. For instance, for Demon Hunter, agility is more important than strength because it also adds you the damage. The outright influences your damage, and it's very important. Now, because of that, you would always like to have much higher agility than anything else. Maybe vitality, but it again depends on what actually do you want to do. Do you want to have more hit points or more damage? And then, of course, the weapon. How do you select a weapon? Now, if you need my opinion on the topic, I would say always take a weapon that offers you higher damage per second. Always, 100% of the time, okay? Sometimes, in some particular circumstances, you would rather like to have something that deals a lot of damage instantly or that has higher attack speed. Now, why would it be important? Let's discuss it on the example of Barbarian. Right now in the background you see Barbarian, and it's the class I played the most up until this point. I will of course delve into other classes, but this specific tutorial is universal for all classes, but we're gonna focus our attention on Barbarian this time. Now, if you use something such as Cleave, an ability for simple attacks such as Cleave, Cleave essentially hits all the targets in an arc, in a about 90% arc, 180% arc, degrees percent, yeah, in front of you, and what essentially means is that it damages all the enemies in front of you. It's an AoE attack, simple attack, but it's not as strong as other types of attack, because it damages all of them simultaneously, and it's not as fast as, for example, Berserker, okay? So Berserker, although deals single target damage, it accelerates yourself to such a point, to such a degree that you deal damage so quickly that you outgun anything there is for a single attack ability, right? So you always have to consider what do you want to have. Like for instance, with a Berserker, I would argue that you would like to have a weapon with higher attack speed. Why? Because the higher attack speed you have already, the faster you will accelerate to your top condition, okay? So for instance, if you have a two-handed sword, which say hits once a second, you will get to your top condition in about like 4 seconds, considering that you're gonna slowly accelerate to your top condition when you start attacking like every 3/4 of a second, thanks to the Berserker skill. Whereas if you have a dagger and you attack, let's say, almost 2 times a second, almost 2 times a second, you will reach your top condition in like 2 seconds, right? You're gonna be like a whirling machine of death because of that. Whereas with Cleave, I would argue that you should rather have slower attacking weapon. Why? Because it's slow anyway, but you want to deal a lot of damage to all the people in front of you, all the enemies in front of you. That's why understanding what you actually aim for is very important. Now, okay, let's just summarize what we have learned today, what we have talked about today. You would rather have a solid character build over a gimmicky build. Solid character build is when you are generally effective against different types of mobs and you don't depend on something specific, like for instance one specific skill or potions. When you're kind of equal on all the battlefields, when you're good against crowds, when you're good against bosses, when you're good against even maybe other players, that's a solid build. A single target over AoE. There's no better, okay? They're both are really important because generally you will meet both monsters that are really easy to kill and monsters that are really hard to kill. So having both single target attacks and AoE attacks are very important. You cannot prioritize one over another. Why? Because it's just generally unwise, and although you can survive like this, as you advance into deeper and deeper into the difficulty settings of Diablo 3, it will progressively become harder and harder. And then understanding what you orient for, be that attributes, what attributes shall it be, what kind of characteristics shall it be, do you want more vitality in order to have more hit points, or do you want to have higher damage and therefore kill enemies much faster? And again, the proper weapon, you want to have always in your hands a proper weapon for your specific skills and with proper damage. Majority of the time you would like to have the weapon with higher DPS, and you would always like to check a stat next to your character doll in the inventory screen so that you're sure that it actually is better. And that would be it for this particular tutorial. I hope you could learn something from me. If you enjoyed the video and my commentary, go ahead and put a like on it, and of course check my channel for other videos and subscribe to it if you would like to support my work and get notified when new content becomes available. I'm so freaking nervous. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it didn't suck. Stay tuned for more content, and bye bye. I actually have this thing. What am I thinking? Go, Mike. Go. Go. Die, you sons of bitches. No. What do you mean? What inventory station? Fool. Damnable fool. What have you done? I will actually call it Mike. The Awesome. Achievement earned. Mike Z, why are you above me? Son of a bitch.